let me start on a positive note first. Kanda Shashti Nalvartikar. And I think at this point, the state of affairs of this city, or perhaps the state, may be gathered from the fact that it competes with Bangalore in the realm of traffic. So my sincere apologies. I was supposed to reach here by 10:10. I don't wish to take the time of anyone present here for granted. It just so happens that there seems to be some kind of a construction on the way at Pallikarnai, and so the entire road was blocked. And then, of course, Muthuramalinga Devar, Nalvartikal, and so there are processions all over the place. I am a huge fan of him, by the way, for the work that he did and for the kind of positions that he managed to take in his period. I wish that he was the icon for this particular state as opposed to other bearded people. So, I understand that free speech is going through a cold storage phase in this state. So, I will try to present whatever I have to say in Dravidian fashion, which means like Rahul Dravid, as opposed to Virendra Sehwag. And I'll try to be as diplomatic as possible, despite my best intentions. First of all, thank you to Sri Somyaji sir, Mr. Ramesh, Ranjani Gayatri, and everybody else who's turned up here and who've been patiently waiting. Sri Somyaji and I have worked together on the Basmati case where we represented the state of Madhya Pradesh in the context of Basmati geographical indications. I had the good fortune of being led by him before the Chief Justice, the then Chief Justice of the Delhi High Court, Sri Sanjay Kishan Kaul. We worked for about 2.5 years on that matter. And after that, this is the first time, I think it's been over 6 years since we met each other. So I'm very, very grateful to him for having taken time out of his schedule. Sunday happens to be the beginning of the week for any senior advocate because that's the day they're flushed with briefings. So for him to have taken time out, what can I say? I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. And Sri Ramesh, I think your products speak for you and on your behalf. And for me, the most heartening aspect is the pride with which they wear the vibhuti before the international audience. So, notwithstanding their literal and figurative efforts to pixelate the vibhuti, it continues to shine brilliantly on his forehead. So I think your products will continue to speak for you, and in a way they will immortalize you. So fantastic work. I learned from the kind of efforts that you've put in such a niche field, and that too in a country which still perhaps takes sports or any other extracurricular activity not so seriously as other countries. So I don't think it's easy to survive in the sphere that you do, and for you to be able to do this full time, kudos to your work and efforts. I think it's an important opportunity and a platform to recognize the stellar work, but also the resistance put in a much needed critical cultural sphere by the duo Ranjani and Gayatri at a time when the arts are going through a rapid phase of deracination and dehinduization. For them to continue to stand by the tradition and for them to put tradition first, I think speaks volumes of their commitments. So thank you very, very much. I don't know how many people have the good fortune of having them in the audience. I count myself as the select few who get the opportunity to say that they participated as an audience member in my talk. So thank you so very much. So I think I'll try to beat around the bush first before I come to the topic. One of the things that I think that motivated me to write the second book more than the first book was the fact that the more I read the literature on the period between 1900 to 1920s, it was so difficult for me to not draw parallels with what we're currently going through. And the question that I had to ask myself was, are we better placed or are we worse off compared to where we were in the 1920s? And I had to come to the unfortunate answer that perhaps you're worse off. and not exactly better placed, for the simple reason that the sense of awareness and the sense of urgency of what is looming ahead seems to be largely missing. And apart from that, the absence of rootedness to the extent that it was in 1920 also means that your commitment to defend your way of life is to that extent offset. So one of the things that I asked myself was, is there a way that I can use this book to show that history continues to be relevant, fortunately and unfortunately, and if this can be used not just as an exercise in dissecting the past, but to show that we are currently reliving a reenactment of the past, and perhaps we are moving towards a red future. And I'm trying to say as much as I can without saying it actually. So I am falling back on the intelligence of the audience to read between the lines as much as possible. I genuinely don't think that the way ahead is sunny or rosy. But I genuinely believe that if we were to see through this particular situation, or if we were to survive what lies ahead of us, then certainly after that, there is a much better scope of trying to live freely and practicing your way of life without any kind of hindrance. But my sense is the next quarter of a century is going to be action-filled in every possible way, with lots of scope for hope and lots of scope for despair. And therefore, I think it's time that this community made its choices. It is the time to coalesce, it is the time to come together, it is the time to bridge as many gulfs as possible within the community. And my intention has always been to show that there is an underlying unity through all these extraneous diversities. And that is the exact opposite of the message that the other side is trying to portray, which is to say that they focus on diversities to the detriment of unity, whereas for us both go hand in hand. The sub-identities need not be submerged at the altar of the larger identity, and the larger identity need not be killed at the altar of the sub-identities. Both need to go hand in hand. That federal cultural unity is what I am trying to present as much as possible. Bharat's federal constitutional structure is a direct consequence of the federal nature of Bharatiya Sanskriti, wherein there is a larger identity and there are multiple sub-identities. They don't see themselves as being necessarily adversaries to each other. That is perhaps the message that I want to present. But the other important message that I am also trying to present is that perhaps people like me and others would stand to benefit thanks to these books and these functions and all these gatherings. But hopefully this shouldn't be the end game. This really has no value in itself, it has no intrinsic value if it does not translate to an actual churn within the society. I have sold over 1 lakh copies. The royalty has its own value, but independent of the royalty, frankly speaking, that royalty doesn't make a difference to my lifestyle as a lawyer. So the idea is to try and present the message independent of the messenger, but unfortunately in our culture, there is a tendency to focus on the messenger as much as the message. Maybe because our system is that for a message to be emulated and for it to be replicated at the level of the society, you need examples, role models, replicable role models. You're looking for examples. An embodiment of the idea who is able to prove that it is possible to live in a particular fashion. It is possible to stand in both the professional world as well as the dharmic world. That experimental model, so to speak, I understand the value of it. But at a point where it goes beyond that and then becomes entirely about the person, then it moves from emulation in terms of a role model to creation of a cult, which I'm trying to actively avoid. For one reason, because it takes away from the seriousness of the somber, perhaps bordering on the dark message that I'm trying to present. The last 8 years or so have been or have brought a certain reason for, let's say, joy and cheer at the political front. But has it really translated to changes on the ground? Or have the changes been ephemeral in nature? Or has the situation worsened These are hard questions that perhaps as a society we must start asking. And these questions have to be independent of what we believe are our political affiliations or political loyalties, because the question is civilizational, the question is not political. Politics is merely a medium. It is the sadhanam to get something done. Beyond that, it has no value as far as I am concerned. So, during the course of the writing of this book, and I hope I can share this vulnerable moment with the audience here, by the time I was done with the 9th chapter, I was trembling with rage after having finished reading the material on the Mopla outrage and having presented the book. And I didn't know how do I conclude the book after having presented so much. I had no idea how to conclude the book because I'd written so much. How do you then summarize a storm? Hopefully not in a teacup, but you still have to give a larger takeaway message for people to walk away with, to say, okay, all of this information, what does it translate to? In these moments, and I'm sure artists are better placed to relate to this particular sentiment, you hope that the emotion presents itself at the right moment. And then the words must flow, or whatever is meant to happen should happen. You just wait for that. And I think on the 20th of June is when I completed the manuscript. At about 2 a.m. in the night is when I completed it. I was all alone in my office. I broke down saying, these words haven't come from me at all whatsoever. The conclusion, I'm 100% sure, was not authored by me. Because both of my editors, one of my editors happens to be perhaps on border left, and the other happens to be on the non-left. And I needed both of them to take a look at the book just to see if an adversarial audience were to decide to make it a point to dissect the book and come after it for, let's say, leaps of logic or, let's say, absence of factual support, what would it translate to? So it was like a red team and a blue team. They basically said, both of you attack the book. Both of them ended up saying, so the one on the opposite side had to say, I have to grudgingly say it's very difficult to beat this evidence because you've done the job of a lawyer here. But I must admit, which I never thought I would, that the conclusion was a punch in the gut. I'm not saying this as some kind of a self-congratulatory message. I'm trying to say that sometimes people must realize that they are merely instruments of a particular activity. Beyond that, they have no role. And so, with deep gratitude for all the accolades and the complimentary words that have been showered, let me say this. I am perhaps standing on the shoulders of giants, and some of them have gone unrecognized, leading very bitter lives. So the hope through all these books is to present their material, which is why I have tried to rely on all those works of R.C. Majumdar and others as much as possible to push and say, please read them, please read them. I'm citing them. Because I think at some stage, a society that does not value its intellectuals must pay the price for it, and perhaps it has paid the price for it. Where people who have batted for you have gone unrecognized, and more than unrecognized, unheeded. Recognition is a matter of attribution. To heed them is to respect what they say and to understand the value in what they say. There's a difference between two. They've gone unheeded not to their detriment, but to your detriment. And the fact that their message, which was presented almost a century ago, continues to be relevant today is a testament to your inability to draw lessons from history. And that your collective memory, pardon me for using this language, sucks. It's abysmal. As a society, we enjoy, revel in that collective amnesia. And it has come to a point where we seem to be perhaps enjoying our victimhood in a slightly masochistic fashion, as opposed to looking for ways and means to get out of this particular mode. There comes a point where a community does not realize that it is actually in the grasp, or let's say the clutches and in the throes of a Stockholm syndrome. And perhaps the Hindu community is a textbook example of it, at least for the better part of it. At least 70% of the population is going through that. And it is worse when it is an unconscious reality, because you don't even know that you're actually going through it. So the hope is that these books will do what they are meant to, which is to awaken. Because I see the process of civilizational renaissance as a three-stage process. The first is awareness. The second is diagnosis. The third is prognosis or prescription. I wish I was a diagnosis or a prognosis. I am unfortunately still at awareness. That is where we are today. This is not the beta or the gamma, we are still at the alpha level. My hunch is by way of practical timelines, assuming that there is greater consensus. So why is this important? Awareness must lead to consensus that there is a shared problem, and then there must be some kind of a collective effort towards diagnosing the extent of the problem. And finally, you look at what is the way forward. I'd be happy if the society is divided on the way forward, but the society is divided on the state of its existence. There being a serious delta or gap between these two stages. So, the better part of our energies are going towards convincing our own people in the first place that we are in the midst of a huge civilizational survival existential problem. Please wake up, please wake up. And at the pace at which the problem is moving, at the pace at which the solution is presenting itself, I suspect it's going to take us at least 10 years to reach a critical mass. Allow me to say this perhaps, which could be a slightly self-defeating statement. I certainly don't have any intention of evicting the left from the Khan Market gang and occupying that particular place in their state. I have no such interest. For the simple reason that I don't relate to that kind of power brokering under any circumstances. I have no intentions whatsoever to be a wheeler, dealer, fixer or a stakeholder in power, contrary to popular perception and the rumors that float around about me. I think all of this must be leading towards some kind of a political aspiration. With so many lawyers present here, and I'm sure they will vouch for what I have to say, a reasonably successful lawyer, you don't need to be even fantastically successful, a reasonably successful lawyer, thanks to his profession, has the best of opportunities to not give a damn about the rest of the world thanks to the opportunities that come his way and the kind of money he makes and the circles that he has access to. He can actually say, to hell with you, I don't need this nonsense. I don't need to burn my blood on a regular basis like this. I don't need to be the subject of hatred and hate mail on a regular basis like this. I don't need to have people sending me anonymous mails on Instagram and other places wishing death and cancer on me and my family. I don't need that kind of negativity at all. But I think one generation has to do the Vishaparna under any circumstances. If we don't do this, and if this generation does not do that, and that means we give ourselves this 25-year period to invest heavily into this, professionally as well as dharmically, because both do not go, they're not in silos, they go hand in hand. A successful grandmaster such as Prajnananda, if he were to go on the international stage wearing the vibhuti proudly and then thanking the Hindu roots and his ancestors for his success, as well as his gurus, can do wonders for turning around young minds. That is where professional success and dharmic traditions go hand in hand. If we have more people on the, let's say, on the popular culture front who take the tradition seriously and who wear it proudly and who attribute their success to all that they've inherited, I think it becomes easier to create a multiplier effect, because unfortunately we are living in an age of heavy pop culture influence. So at the very least, as opposed to dissing that particular trend, I'd like to see how to use that trend to my benefit. So the hope is that a dry, archaically written book, or the first two books, should hopefully find some kind of representation on the big screen, and there is some effort in that particular direction. People have organically and naturally gravitated towards the ideas of the book, and they've expressed an interest. Should that happen, I hope to actually, that's one of my goals, at some point to write a screenplay, to actually put it forward in a very clear fashion, expressing exactly what I want to, no holds barred, no punches held back, assuming that the censor board allows it even under this government. And not this government, that government. By the time I'm done with the book, so a lot of questions are bound to come my way, so let me try and preempt a few questions at the outset. Have I made up my mind on the Constitution? No, I haven't. The exercise isn't complete. I still don't know what to make of the document yet. Because that would seem like a predetermined, or it's like a confirmation bias where you're trying to fit facts to fit a particular narrative. I don't suffer from that. My opinion or my positions with respect to the Constitution have drastically changed after I started this particular exercise. So if anybody has any questions on the Constitution and what it was and whether it was an anti-Hindu document or a pro-Hindu document, I will give a very tentative, hedgy answer. I'd say it's at best a mixed bag. But which way does the mix tilt, I still don't know. But if I were to be asked a question based on the two books, what do you think of the movement towards the Constitution? I would say we were not being led by freedom fighters, we were being led by compromisers. That is the clear understanding. Any out of the multiple strands in the country, unfortunately one of the strands got projected because of state support. So you will see a very clear parallel between the manner in which the British projected the Congress and the manner in which the Congress projected the left establishment post-independence. You will see exactly that particular modus operandi being carried forward later. That is to say, despite there being multiple voices representing a plurality of opinions, a particular establishment chooses to emphasize and focus on one particular strand of opinion because it is convenient to it and it is also detrimental to the civilization. And that's exactly the relationship that existed between the British and the Congress, and that's exactly the relationship that Nehru and the Marxists enjoyed. I'm trying to show those parallels. And the attempt also is to show that the revolutionaries are the true unsung heroes and the extremists within the Congress were the people who pushed the Congress to adopt independence as the primary possession. I've said this before, I don't know how many people have had an opportunity to listen to it, that people who were asking for complete independence were branded as lunatics across the board by every member of the Congress. Branded as lunatics, and this was not in the 1800s, this was in the early 1900s. So, 4 decades before independence, and at least 2 decades before independence, Purna Swaraj was not on the table and there was no consensus on that. And that tells you, not the nature, it doesn't tell you much about the nature of the politics of it, but that tells you about the nature of the civilization in the first place. So the society itself is not interested in being completely free, of having complete autonomy. Because it is possible to limit the scope of the discussion only to the political realm. And they'd say, no, but these politicians were like this. But where are they being, who are they, where are they coming from? It's not as if they're being airdropped and parachuted from the heavens. They are coming from the society. And therefore, your respect for those people who manage to keep their civilizational ethos and moorings alive when being surrounded by a sea of colonially, let's say, colonized, westernized Hindu secular idiots goes up. You actually have a lot of respect for Sri Aurobindo. You have a lot of respect for Sri Lala Lajpat. You have a lot of respect for Bal Gangadhar Tilak or Bipin Chandra Pal. Those people who represented what was known as the extremist group or the Garandal of the Congress. The hope also through the book is that you will not fixate on Congress as an organization, but Congress as a mindset. Because it's easier to make this a Congress-BJP debate, please don't. And I've clearly said that the mindset finds bodies to populate and inhabit. Which means what was once the mindset of the Congress could perhaps be the mindset of some other organization today. So it is for you to be wary of it. Because that mindset has moderation, compromise and negotiation on all civilizational non-negotiables as its primary modus operandi, which means it comes at the expense of your right of agency and to say, I will not budge from this particular position no matter what. These are the non-negotiables. Either we fight and confront each other on this or you vacate the place. That's the only way forward. So I hope, and I hope the organizers will pardon me for saying this and being as diplomatic as possible, that the book leads to less moderation, greater intransigence, creation of more hardliners, people who realize that there is nothing left to negotiate anymore. Would you want to see 1947 as an independence, as the year of independence, or as the year of the partition of a sacred geography? Is the question that you must ultimately ask yourself. If you treat it as Punya Bhumi, and it is Bharatavarshe Bharatakhande, it is no more Akhand in that particular sense. And that must be a cause for mourning and a cause for reorientation of your priorities and recalibration of your priorities, as opposed to a constant celebration of something which has no meaning according to me. And something that has come at the expense of such bloodshed. There must be a collective Tarapanam done for all the people who lost their lives at the time of the partition. The one thing that you may want to learn from the Jewish experience is their ability to memorialize a particular incident and live it every year. We celebrate Independence Day, but we don't have any day which is dedicated to the lives lost in the partition. That is the sad reality of the Hindu civilization today. This is not to fill you with despair, but to fill you with a certain sense of purpose and sharpness. இதுக்கு மேல இடம் விட்டோம்னா இடமே கிடையாது. We'll be asked to vacate the place. This is the only place where we can comfortably call it our homeland. Hopefully that should be the way of the future. So kindly realize that all the shosha aside, focus only on the message and implement it at your, let's say, in your immediate spheres. The most immediate sphere and the unit that requires attention is a unit that is entirely within your control, hopefully, your family. You can think of the civilization later, focus on your families first. And at the very least, ensure that this point of view has purchased and has some, let's say, relevance and resonance within the family unit first. Because now, within families, you have clearly a division between the wokes and the non-wokes. Especially if you happen to be parents of teens, preteens and adolescents and people in their 20s. Try and address those issues. Because those issues are not divorced and independent of the larger issue. Because wokes are the useful idiots in the hands of anti-Hindus. They are fantastic ammunition. Because they will weaponize their Hindu identity, which is ultimately only a paper identity for them, against you to say, no, this stand of Hindu opinion is equally valid because I am a Hindu, without any knowledge of Dharma whatsoever. That is the strategy that a lot of anti-Semites used against the Jews by creating anti-Israeli Jews within America, within Israel. And that strategy is being replicated in Bharat, I would say with greater success. This is possible, this is doable, this is deliverable. You don't worry about Tirupati and all of the temples. You focus on yourself, you focus on your families, you focus on your immediate temples, you focus on those temples that belong to your community. Focus on the local first, the global will handle itself. Because you'll see that through the book, the extent of commitment of the other side in terms of language, in terms of education, in terms of what they felt, and this is not just for the convert, but even the non-converts, so to speak, the ashrafs of the particular community, how they ensured that there is a sense of leadership in the particular community. It is that sense of leadership that is being destroyed within the Hindu community. If you think that a community will move on its own in a particular direction, then I suspect that you are a very poor student and a below average student of human psychology. Because movements need leadership. Movements need one focal point which has the ability to rally the rest of the community around it. It's not just a cause, it also needs a certain group of people. That group of people has maintained a certain continuity as far as the other group is concerned. But that very group is effectively a vilified group today as far as the Hindu community is concerned. The message couldn't have been clearer. I'm sure you know what I mean. So I'm I'm requesting people to realize their civilizational duties, their dharmic duties. Please, hopefully, instead of circulating videos on WhatsApp, see how can you apply the message in your home. That's the only thing that I would seriously request. There is no better time to create trouble than when you are in opposition and when you're out of power, because the onus is on the person who wields power. I would any day love to be the last bencher who's taking pot shots at someone. That's been my role even in law school. I was almost about to be rusticated. The only thing that, the reason why they held back is because I was ranked 2 in the institution and therefore my grade saved me. Otherwise, I had less than 50% attendance in 5 out of 6 subjects in the 5th semester. Like I said, you're not worth listening to. Anybody using PPTs for a particular lecture is not worth listening to. I'm not going to attend the class. My point is, someone's in power today. I wish him the very best of luck in trying to control me and us. Vande Mataram.